All right, guys, I'm gonna try to do my best here to keep this short. I've recorded a couple of times and it's coming out 18-20 minutes, and I'm trying to keep this down. But what I'm trying to do is put out enough information so we don't get a bunch of questions, because I'm trying to dispel a myth, and all the questions that go along with it tend to try to answer those in a short period of time. Let's see if I can do this. All right, we're talking about springs and magazines. I just watched a video by US Freedom 22. He's talking about keeping mags loaded. I just want to add to what he said, and from what I know, I might do a video response to him. I'm not sure yet, but magazines and the myth that if you keep them loaded, they're going to become unreliable, which is a complete myth. Let me start off by saying that. The theory being that if you keep the spring compressed, it's going to take a set, and it's not going to feed the rounds properly. Okay, so reasons why that's not true. The spring's designed to function that way. It's designed to be compressed and hold its strength and feed the rounds up through the magazine. So right off the bat, that's incorrect. So that's the way the spring is designed. A spring off the machine compressed will take a set, but it will find an equilibrium. It's not like a piece of I don't have a paper clip or something, but it's not a piece of steel where you bend it and it stays bent. Even to a certain degree, some steel will spring back a little bit, but it will bend. It will compress. In this case, in this type of spring, compress, and then it will spring back, and eventually it will find where it's supposed to be, and it will stay that way. Now that's as long as you don't damage the spring. So if you were to take the spring and stretch it beyond its natural state, or you were to somehow compress it beyond where it's supposed to be compressed and damage the spring, then you're going to have problems. But as long as it stays within the body of the magazine where it was designed to reside, it's going to maintain a proper amount of pressure on that stack of rounds. So that's now some other ways the springs can be damaged. Obviously, excessive heat and excessive cold. Now a spring, again, people often say you have more damage of the spring, you loading and unloading it and cycling it. Well, to a certain extent, in theory, that's true. Cycling a spring is what I don't want to use the term wear out, but for lack of a better term, wears out. But if it's if it's operating within the parameters of which it was designed, you won't have that problem. If this spring was stretching to the top of the magazine and then going beyond where it's supposed to go, and then coming back, and then going beyond, and then coming back, then you would have a problem. But as you can see, the spring's longer than the body of the magazine, so it's constantly in a state of compression. So as it won't extend past the length it's supposed to go. So what you see, and I don't know if I mentioned this, I did in the other video, guys, when they clean their magazines, because they think they might have, well, for example, here's a good example. This is a very new magazine. I've never put rounds in. All I've done is I've taken out the plastic. They were both the same company. This one had a black follower too, even though it's brand new in the plastic, and I'll talk about the followers in a second here. But the only difference is I've added a Magpul, a new follower to it. This spring, if I put them stop, is about, I would say, maybe 1/4 of an inch longer than this one. This one's been used probably thousands of times. This magazine's well over 20 years old, so you can see that there is a little bit of difference there. Well, I can't really, this is a different magazine entirely, but there's a big difference there. That's about almost 3/4 of an inch, I would say. But that's, again, it's a different magazine, so we're apples and oranges there. But so yeah, as long as these springs stay, within the, as I was saying, some people decide that they need to stretch their magazines or stretch their springs because they've been compressed so long. And that again, you're damaging the spring. It's settled in its normal, natural state. It's settled where it's supposed to be. There's no tension on it, and that's where it's supposed to be. Okay. Now, Now, again, off the machine, it may be putting 20 pounds of force on that stack of rounds, and I'm just using that as for sake of argument. You know, after it settles in, it might put 18 pounds of force on that stack of rounds. Well, the specification to feed those rounds through that magazine might only be 10 pounds. Now, as it feeds up through the magazine, it's going to have less pressure because it's getting towards the top of the stack. The springs extending, and it's not as much force on the stack of rounds, and it might get to the top of the magazine and it's only putting 15 pounds of pressure on that stack. But the specification says that you need 10 pounds of pressure to get the rounds through, and you're still within the limits of that, within the specification. All right, so where can you go wrong? As I said, these are USGI issue magazines. These are designed by the engineers to meet, or I'm sorry, they're produced for the government to meet a specification, and that, you know, that's a set in stone kind of thing. Here's an after product company, like I had said, Magpul, good company, good quality magazine, and you got two magazines over here from C Products. Now I'm going to do a comparison. Oh, let me before I go there, let me talk about the followers real quick. Where I think a lot of the myth comes from is probably starts with the follower. This is an old black follower, which are no longer to be used in any magazines, and should be thrown away. I just happen to have this one sitting around, and as you can see, the difference in followers, and I'll just use this one for comparison. Sorry about that. And the difference, obviously there's a huge difference here. This is an anti-tilt follower and this is not. The new tan ones look much like this. The green ones are also supposed to be anti-tilt, a little bit different design. They have some ears on them, but not quite as pronounced as this. What happens is this follower would tilt in the magazine and bind, and it would cause the rounds not to feed up through properly. So that's where we ran into the problem with magazines. People would assume that the spring wasn't putting enough pressure up on the follower, and it would just stop pushing the rounds up through. So they'd bang it around or whatever, and then it would go through. That's why, well, one of the reasons for sports initially was to slap up on the bottom of the magazine to try to jar this back into place, as well as push the shock could potentially allow it to feed, but that's another story. So if anybody's familiar with immediate action on a M16 style rifle, slap the bottom of the magazine, the first S, and the S in sports is for that reason. So or one of the reasons anyway. So now let's compare. So you want to have anti-tilt followers, at least the green, the lime green one or the mint green ones, up through, or by I recommend Magpul, or if you can get your hands on the new Army tan ones, but those are probably made by Magpul, I would assume. But anyway, so let's take a look at two different springs here. I'll use this a little bit better to see. If you can take and see the difference in the springs, at least the color you'll be able to see. This one's rusty and this one isn't. Now you might not be able to see this on camera, but this one is also a thicker gauge and this one's thinner. You can feel the difference. So that's another problem you're going to run into. You buy cheap, crappy magazines, which actually they weren't necessarily cheap, but they turn out to be crappy magazines. This stored over time rusting is going to decrease the there goes the follower. It's going to decrease the strength of the spring and potentially fail. It could rust through and rot out. So that's another thing you need to keep in mind. Quality magazines. Now, I'm glad I did this video, because had I not taken these mags apart, I wouldn't have seen these rusting. I just assumed that because I paid a decent amount of money for these mags from the factory, that they were good to go, and obviously they aren't. Something else to keep in mind. Let me take this. We're going to take this off. These two followers. Look at the difference in the in the size. So this one is potentially going to compress further. Again, when we're talking about, you know, exceeding the limits of the spring where it was designed to stay. Because this is shorter, this is what hits the bottom of the floor plate on the magazine and doesn't allow it to compress any further. And this is shorter, so it's going to compress further than this one, or the black. Even the black one has the correct length thing there, so it's hard to compare. But so something else to keep in mind. But I think that pretty much sums it up. I did it a lot quicker than I did last time. Yeah, don't damage them. Leave your springs alone. Don't try to stretch them. Leave them the way they are. Buy quality magazines, either government, you know, specified magazines if you can get your hands on them, or quality like a PMag or something like that. Guys will buy HK mags, but I can't see spending that much money on that. But yeah, stay away from the cheap crap. So now this, I'm gonna have to either buy. I think these are the stainless steel. These are aluminum body. I'm gonna have to buy a new spring. Definitely new followers. I'll find out how many of these I've got, and yeah, rebuild those mags. Unless it comes out to be cheaper to just get new mags. I don't know. I'll have to see. Well, talk to you guys later.